Okay. Good evening. Welcome to Town Hall. Today is Monday, March 7. It's 6:30 p.m., and we will be having a work session to go through the municipal budget. First order of business is the pledge to the flag. Next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement statement, which I will read. The town of South Kingstown pays homage to the indigenous people and land on which the town is now located. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Narragansett tribe whose land and water we benefit from today. This brings us to the beginning of budget work session number 2, which we will be going through the municipal side of the budget. I'd just like to say in advance that we will be opening up for public comment at the conclusion of this meeting. We'd like to hear your input. We appreciate any comments that you have, and it's important to us because we take it into regard into the decision-making process up here. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Terry Murphy, Town Manager.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to present the municipal budget this evening. I will start out by saying we do have quite a lengthy presentation that we will try to make our way through. Of course, the council is welcome to ask questions at any point in the presentation. I would also like to acknowledge and thank all of the department heads and division heads who are here this evening who have contributed to putting this municipal budget together this evening. The actual budget document is linked to ClerkBase, where the agenda is. It is linked to the agenda for those at home who may be streaming the meeting, and the slide presentation is also linked. And with that, we will jump right in. Everyone, I think, knows everybody who's here this evening. Again, this is the second of 3 work sessions for the municipal budget. And as I explained last Thursday, there are a number of meetings, public meetings, that are held through March and April still. We have a meeting on March 9th, and that is for the Human Service and Outside Agencies. And then there is the Town Council adoption of the preliminary budget on Monday, March 21st, and then in April, there are 2 public hearings on the budget on the 14th and the 18th. As the council is aware, by town charter, the town manager is required to present a municipal budget to the council by the 1st of March each year. We are here now to review that budget. We have just our basic org chart of the town and the departments that fall under the purview of the citizens of South Kingstown and the town council. They're all within this budget tonight. Just very briefly, what I'd like to point out are some of the major significant changes in the budget for FY22-23. As I mentioned last week, there is a proposed 2.2% increase in the tax levy over the fiscal year 21-22. You will see that in subsequent slides, the detail of that. There will also be, due to the full property revaluation, a decrease in the tax rate from $14.45 per thousand to $11.02 per thousand. That's a 23.75% decrease in the tax rate. And again, we do have some slides specific to property revaluation and assessments and how that plays into the decrease in the tax rate. Also in this budget, we will be going over the expansion of the proposed expansion of the EMS department. As the council is aware, we have been speaking for the past several months in terms of a new facility for EMS to house a 3rd paramedic unit. To go along with that, we are proposing the staffing necessary to operate that 3rd unit, and it is proposed for mid-year for this FY22-23 budget to begin in January. Also, in this budget, we will see contractual obligations, personnel and benefits will be increasing 2.5% on the personnel side for all bargaining units, and approximately 4% increase on the health benefit side. And one other point in here, you will see in some departments that there is a reallocation of facilities personnel under a centralized facilities division, which exists already. These are just positions that the funding is being moved over to facilities, and then there's a charge back to the departments that those building maintenance folks are assigned to. So you'll notice in some of the departmental budgets that you'll see a decrease in personnel and benefits, but then you'll see an increase in services, and it's a wash, basically. It's just being assigned as an expense to outside departments like the Guild, the Senior Center, the Rec Center. You'll be able to see that expense as a service, not as a salary or benefit, because that'll be rolled under the facilities division. We also have in the police department an addition of 2 community resource officers. As the council may recall, in the approved framework of the rescue plan budget, there is a police community resource program that's going to focus on mental health in the community, and those positions are in this budget. The revenue reflected for those positions is reflected from an infusion from the rescue plan dollars for the first 2 years of funding, and this will be the first year of funding for those positions. And our chief will tell you more about that when he comes up to go through the budget. Just briefly, this is an overview of the proposed budget and some of the details of that. We went over the school fund last Thursday. You'll see the general fund at $29,503,999, which is a 2.240564 increase over the current year, and that's an 8.22% increase. What you'll notice is the proposed property tax levy is $75,745,061. That's a $1,677,126 increase over the current year, and that is a 2.26% change in the tax levy over the current year. And you can also see that we have a proposed property tax transfer to the schools, which is level funded at $55,994,773. That it does not change from the current year. And then you will...
Sorry, just, I wanted to note on the slide, there's a misprint, and it shows like $1 million decrease there on that line item for the PTT transfer.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I see it. Oop, I will correct that. That should be 55, not 54. It should be level funded with last year. Thank you. And on the proposed tax rate, you will see that it has dropped from 1445 to 1102. Again, that is a direct result of the full revaluation that was completed and now is in the process of the third-party contractor taking appointments from citizens to ask questions about their assessments. The final tax rate is not certified until June of 2022. This is, again, just a quick look at the summary of expenditures across the board for the town, starting with the general fund and the school fund, the two primary expenses for town operations, along with the other separate funds that are detailed here, which we will get into this evening. And we are proposing a $102,546,998 complete operating budget, inclusive of all funds. And this is reflective of the revenues for the proposed 22-23 year. You will see the general fund and the school fund, again, are the primary revenue sources for this fund, and it balances with the summary of expenditures. Just quickly, this is a look at how the property tax is distributed across the town, and you'll see the school fund is almost 73% of the property tax distribution, with municipal operations being the remainder, including the separate enterprise funds. This takes a look at the actual distribution table form, so you can see what is proposed to go to the general fund, senior services, the rec center. Again, these details will be provided to you later this evening. The debt service fund on both the municipal and the school sides, the school fund and the wastewater fund, and then finally the doubtful receivables and senior exemptions as well. This is just a history of the property tax levy rate allocation, and you'll see proposed for 22-23 that the town side, municipal side, is 26.42% of the total rate allocation, and 73.58% is proposed for the schools. This is a look at the projected property tax rolls for 22-23, and this gets into showing the results of the revaluation. If you look at the last column of the projected tax roll, you'll see $6,833,660,800 in taxable land and buildings in South Kingstown, up from $5 billion in taxable property, approximately $5 billion from the current year. You'll also see tangible property at $105,068,367. So the net taxable property minus exemptions is still in the $6 billion range, $6,873,751,897, reflecting a property tax growth of 25.43%. We also have the motor vehicle roll, which is estimated or projected at $211,862,570. So the total taxable property, you'll see on the bottom line, is $6.9 billion, almost $7 billion for the town. Significant increase over the 2021 year. When we talk about revaluation and property tax, what we've tried to do here is show a sample or an example of what a property would be assessed at in an average single-family home in 2021-22 was $401,370. That's the average single-family resident based on all of the taxable property in South Kingstown. In 22-23, the average single-family residence went up to $548,537, reflecting a 36.67% increase in assessed value. So what does that mean for a homeowner who has property that has increased? In this example, what you see is that if your property was assessed at $401,370 at the end of 2021, in 21-22, your taxes were $5,800 at $1,445 per thousand. At the end of 2021, if your assessed value went up to $548,537, your property tax would be $6,045 based on the new levy of $11.02 per thousand, which reflects an increase of $245 in property tax. That is an example. Of course, every property has been assessed at a different level. Some folks have seen a 25% increase. Some folks have seen a 45% increase. The point to be made here is that if you have a new assessed value, you should be calculating your projected taxes based on $11.02 per thousand, not on the $1,445. And the next slide may help to illustrate what that might look like at various levels of percentage increases. So if your property is assessed at $400,000 in 2020, your taxes were $5,780. If you had a 35% increase in your assessed value, that bumps it to $540,000. I'm on the first line here. And your taxes would be $5,951, or a $171 increase over the previous year. So that would be just under a 3% increase in your taxes. And if it went up 40%, you can see the increase depending on where your assessed value is at. Your property taxes lie at a certain point. There are some folks who had their assessments go up under 31%, which in general means they will not see an increase in their taxes.
I know that the tax assessor's office has been getting a lot of calls about the reevaluation. So my question is, are they collecting some feedback from the residents about their concerns and sort of organizing that? Because the anecdotal feedback that I get is a little concerning, where somebody was told, well, your house just looks nicer, so that's how we got, like that was said, that's why you got that, your house is nicer than the other house next to you. It seems very arbitrary. The person wasn't very prepared, they had to be called back, so I don't know if anybody's collecting that. I know we've contracted with Vision. I'm a little disappointed in the responses from them.
So the town has gotten calls. The first step in this process is for those who have had assessments and have questions is to contact Vision Appraisal, because they are our third-party assessment firm. They've done work for the town for several years. They're a reputable company. The first step is for residents who have questions about their assessments to contact Vision Appraisal. The town has both a phone number and a website where folks can go on and make appointments in order to start an initial conversation about their assessments. So we have gotten some feedback. We've also been in touch with Vision to provide them that feedback. We have noticed a considerable drop in the phone calls since the tax rate has been presented. I think many people have understood now that they shouldn't be calculating their next year's taxes on $1,445 a thousand, but $11.02. So yes, we're regular touch with Vision Appraisal. They are our contracted provider, and they are required by our contract to be able to provide information and feedback and answers to questions of residents about their assessments. That's the first step in the process.
So does Vision provide to you where the homes went up 30+% and where the homes went up closer to the average? Because some homes, we had someone speak that said their home went up over 30%. So I think there are many homes. I would like to know how many homes are in this $400,000 range and so on, so that we can see, because I think a lot of people are on the other side of sticker shock. So just trying to figure out.
Sure. So I will need to get back to you. I'm sure Vision Appraisal does provide an overview of the assessments. That information is public information. It's on the website for anyone to take a look at. But they could, I don't know this, but I'm assuming they would provide a report out based on either regions or areas maybe that have had an impact.
Even by zip code, there are multiple zip codes in town, just to sort of get a sense of where the percentages are higher.
Yep. And of course, there are other factors that go into that process, because it could be based on somebody putting an addition on their house, or some, improvements being made, those types of things. But we don't know that.
It just doesn't feel very scientific when someone is told your house just looks nicer than the other people on your street.
Yeah, and that one I can't speak to. But if that's the feedback that's been gotten, we will certainly share that with Vision.
Terry, now that we're on the matter, I'd just like to have you articulate the sort of appeal process here, where if you're unhappy with the revaluation, what you would do to appeal the process. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the first step, obviously, is the informational appointment with Vision Appraisal. They discuss on the phone or answer questions to the residents. In some situations, it will come back to the town, and the assessor can actually go out and take a look at the property and also have a conversation with Vision Appraisal on that if they've got questions. The next step in the process would become if a resident is not happy with the response or the answers about their assessment, they can appeal that to the assessor's office through the Board of Appeals. And that would occur before the end of May, so that we could certify the roll in June. So people do have a second bite at the apple to come back and sit down and have a meeting with the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Just very briefly, as we get into the municipal side of the budget and the expenses with regard to the municipal operations, we have a very high-level general fund expenditure detail, which is based on how the funds are broken out. And as you can see, and is obvious for most municipal services, the bulk of the budget is related to personnel and benefits. And you can see our proposed general fund expenditures at the $29,503,999. This table breaks out the budget by functions. At a high level, we have general government, which is town council, boards and commissions, town manager's office, legal, town clerk's office. We'll get into the detail on those. General services are basically town hall-based operations, planning, assessment, finance, collections, those types of services within the town hall. We have public safety, which is the bulk or almost half of the municipal program, and that reflects not only police but EMS and animal welfare, and also our communications and fire alarm department. Public Works is our highways, streets, tree warden. We have Parks and Recreation. which also encompasses outside funds, as does Public Works. We'll get into those as well. Libraries, non-departmentals, which Zach will go over those at the time, and then also the town council's approved capital outlay, which is the approximately $1.8 million for the pay-as-you-go for FY '22-23. Special revenue funds, these are the outside funds that we'll be talking about later, but this will show the revenues that are generated through these, these are the operating funds that are assigned to each of these funds: Peacedale Office Building, Senior Services, the Neighborhood Guild, and the Community Recreation Center. And our enterprise funds through our Public Services Department: water, wastewater, and solid waste. That's $7.1 million for FY '22-23. And other funds that are operating transfers out of the general fund. You'll see the school department, and again, you'll see the reflected numbers for transfers to the senior center, the community recreation center, the debt service fund, and wastewater. This pie chart just reflects the general fund revenue sources. Again, it's similar to what I just showed you, just in a pie chart form. You can see that property taxes are 67.12% of the overall revenue sources, and state aid and departmental revenue and fines and charges, those are the other larger contributors to the revenue sources for the town. And this reflects our combined revenue of all funds, which includes the general fund, the operating fund, and all of the separate funds that generate revenue for the town, for their programs, I should say, not for the town. This is difficult to read. I really am only placing this table here to let the council and the public know that this is part of the budget document, and this really lays out a full picture of all of the budgeted funds combined, expenditures and revenues and expenditures for the town program. Again, that's that $102 million budget. If the council has no questions, we will move into the municipal department budgets. Is there any questions?
The hard-to-read slide, just a question. The total revenues and the total expenditures don't exactly match? Is that something?
No, so that is reflective of one fund, which is the Peacedale Office Building Fund, is reflecting a surplus of $12,955. It's self-sustaining. It generates its own fund. That's the difference.
It's good to be on that side of it.
That it is good to be on that side, yes. So we will move into the general government services. Again, you'll see these: it's town council, budget referendum, probate court, assessment board of review, planning board, Concom, and zoning board of review. And here we have the budget for boards and commissions, and you'll see reflected here in FY '22-23 a proposed decrease of 2.23%. There are not any significant changes with the exception of the planning board. You'll see a proposed budget of $10,660, which is about 24% higher than the current year, and I believe that is due to the increase in the stipend for the planning board. Legal services, this is for the town solicitor. It's also for the general municipal support, criminal prosecution representation, Lock Lord, which is our representation for bond-related matters, and also for labor and employment law functions. And you will see this budget is proposing a 1.9% increase in the total legal services for FY '22-23.
How does that actually work?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Well, I mean, Mike's contract or not, he doesn't have a contract?
So the town solicitor, that's just one piece of this legal, because there are other firms that we utilize as well, but the town solicitor's contract is the, excuse me, not contract, fee is the largest because they do the bulk of the legal support in terms of town council, zoning board, planning board, a variety of other legal services for the town. So it's the town council's purview for budgeting for the legal department. This year, we are proposing a 2% increase based on general increases across the board. But it's a council decision. We generally reflect a similar increase as other departments in terms of personnel.
So it's not something that Mike's firm said, this is the new contract, or this is the new amount?
No, that's correct.
Just taking whatever was and adding 2% to it?
For the legal counsel, you'll see that everything else is remaining flat, the miscellaneous expenditures, which is the only other line, but, so, yes, it typically reflects an annual cost of living similar to the personnel side of the budget. This budget also includes the town manager's budget. You'll see a pretty flat budget here, no changes in terms of personnel. Of course, this budget will, reflect what might be coming down the pike, but for now, you'll see an increase in salary and benefits based on the personnel, the recommended personnel increases of 2.5%. And I am going to call up Luke Murray, our Director of Administrative Services, to discuss the personnel budget.
Good evening. How are you? So I'm going on my 6-month tenure here. So the first thing I'll say is you have an outstanding team here. Very proud to work with the team. But obviously we've been in transition for a couple years. We've had quite a few retirements. We're seeing staffing, issues that are seen in other municipalities. So throughout Rhode Island and throughout the country, we are seeing a lot of people retire. Some of it's due to COVID. Styles of work have changed with work at home. Some of that cannot be done in a municipal environment, and so that puts us at a little bit of a deficit on recruitment and retention. So when I talk about this budget, I just frame it in that context where, as I come in as the new Director of Administrative Services, and part of my role is to oversee personnel, one of my obligations is to ensure that the team remains robust, trained, make sure that council has a workforce delivering the services that the people expect. So along those lines, one of my duties is to ensure that we're properly staffed, to ensure that we're properly trained, ensure that the directors feel supported and employees feel supported. So this year's budget is proposing an increase. A part of that increase is due to a part-time staffing, which actually a couple years ago this council had approved a part-time staffer. Unfortunately, due to COVID, they kind of put the brakes on. That money was diverted to some greeters up front for COVID. And then that eventually fell off last year. That was proposed to go to a full-time, eventually fell off due to budgetary constraints. I'm proposing to bring that back at a 0.6, would allow our personnel administrator, who quite frankly is overloaded at the moment with the amount of job postings having to do, OJI claims, legal, and I will say that any ball dropped in any of those categories could result in a claim that would be substantial against the town. So we want to make sure we prevent that. Loss prevention is a big thing for me, for us. Want to make sure we're protecting the town and also supporting everyone, so I'm requesting that we fund that position. In addition, we're supporting some additional initiatives. One thing about a trained workforce is starting in our own department. So the personnel administrator would like to get certified with the Society of Human Resource Management. I'm encouraging her to do so there is a reflected increase in that. There's also a reflected increase in our health and wellness budget, as well as what I've deemed the SPARK committee, which is really focused on empowerment of our employees. So events, small things that we can do to aim towards retention. Because every time we lose an employee, it takes months to fill the role. It takes years to train them. There's a substantial amount of institutional knowledge we lose. I don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that. So it's important that we retain those individuals, and the way to do so is to make them feel supported in a collaborative work environment. So that's what we're trying to build here, and that's the tone I've been trying to set. So while this is an increase this year, I do believe it's warranted. I think it's going to be supportive moving forward of what you want for your team, and it's going to help us fill some vacancies, quite frankly, we have in leadership roles right now, and make sure that those roles stay filled for the future. And I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Next, we have the town clerk budget, and I will hand over the microphone to Susan so she can go through that.
The town clerk's office has 6 major divisions: town council, land records, Board of Canvassers, Registry of Vital Statistics, probate court, and business licenses. We have a staff of 6 full-time persons. This year's budget is fairly flat for town clerk side, other than the general increases in the salaries and benefits. The canvassing side of the budget has an increase because we have 2 elections to run this year, and with the revaluation just adopted by the General Assembly, we are going up from 10 polling places to 11 polling places, which is going to require additional staffing. And as you know, we are required to have emergency in-person voting for 20 days prior to each election, which under COVID was so well utilized that we've had to hire poll workers for that time period. So there is an increase in the budget for the stipends for the poll workers that will have to work those days prior to the election, as well as overtime for the staff and additional poll workers on election day as well. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. And I will hand the mic over to Zach to go through the Finance Department budget.
So as you know, the Finance Department is responsible for financial management and administration, accounting and cash management, procurement and risk management, and tax and utility collection. The budget we're presenting this year for the Finance Department is relatively flat in terms of our expenditure. The increases that are significant are on the benefit side, and mainly due to increasing of health care across the board at 4.5%, as you heard earlier. And in particularly in the Finance Department, we are increasing specific elections for employees that may be changing from not having a plan, from receiving a buyback to actually having a health care plan, or changing from a family to from a single to a family. So that's where you see the increase that's responsible for the increase in the benefits. As I said, the expense side, or the operating expenditures, are relatively flat compared to the 22 adopted. Any questions?
Thank you, Zach.
I might add, if folks are following along at home in the budget document, we are under tab 6, General Services. So in case folks are looking at the budget document, that does have the expenditure and revenue statements for each department. What you are seeing on the slide presentation is basically a funding comparison of the budget summary. Next, we will call up Lori Ann Fox for our information technology budget.
Good evening. Thank you. The IT department is a staff of 3 full-time employees. The increase to the IT budget primarily is contractual salaries and benefits. There's also an increase to the services line, which is probably the biggest one. It's $38,000 approximately. That encompasses hardware and software maintenance agreements that we have. For instance, our financial payroll budgeting system that we have with Tyler Technologies, OpenGov that we use for permitting and business licensing. Our Vision software is all encompassed under there, so there's a number of increases. One of the other big increases that we're doing this year is we're putting in redundant internet providers. So right now we have Cox for internet. If that goes down, a lot of our applications now are in the cloud, so we're not able to service the residents when they have a question or they want information or to pull reports. So having a redundant internet provider, most likely probably Verizon, those are the 2 big ones in the state of Rhode Island, we would look to put that in for both town hall and the police department as well.
Thank you, Lori.
To answer any questions you may have.
Just one basic question. Commodities in all of the budgets, is that just general supplies, like paper and...
Yes, that's materials and supplies for operations.
So for IT, that would be like if we have to buy replacement keyboards,
Yeah,
mice,
exactly.
USB drives. Other departments, it may be office supplies sort
Exactly.
of things. Yep.
So I know you're super busy and you juggle lots of different things. So a couple of years ago, the app came out, and I know it's not a big expense, but I don't know if you've done any evaluation of that, and if that's something that we need to continue spending money on. Is that in here, or?
So that's actually not in the IT department. It's spread out over a number of departments. I know the police pays for some of it. The recreation department pays for some. I think finance may pay a portion of it. Zach can correct me if I'm wrong. That's broken out based on the location. So when you open up the app, you see front and center is like the police department. I think the libraries are there as well. It's something I think we should evaluate. I think the hope was, especially during COVID, so that was something originally that we paid with some money from COVID to get information out to more people. And we have advertised it in various locations.
Right.
We have QR codes that people can take a picture of to get that information. Last I checked, which it's been a few months, we only had in the neighborhood of about 1,300 downloads. And that was between, multiple devices.
Yeah, I mean, I had it honestly for a while, and it's just as easy to go to the website because it's very, very similar.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that comes in, when we would decide, but that's something, I think it's like for a future self, when we have time, like that's like the frosting on a cake, but we haven't really gotten to some of the fundamentals of, I don't want to burden you with like, fix the app, make it prettier, because we have big things.
A lot of the information pulls from our website.
Yeah.
So we initially made a conscious decision because so many of the staff members were used to updating the website and putting information out there. We really didn't want to burden folks with learning another technology of how to put information there. So we have a lot of it pulling from the website. So, but I agree. We probably need to evaluate whether it's reaching the population that we thought it would.
Right, and if we have the energy to invest in that area when we don't really have the ability to do some of the other, it's just another thing on a list of things to do, and
Yes, there's
Maybe-
definitely a list.
right, and maybe in future years, there would be energy and time to do it, but it's maybe just a thing that we're just rolling along because it's a tiny
I
expense.
think at one point there was a discussion around having like a PIO, a public information officer, who could kind of handle social media, the website, and the mobile app.
Yep.
And that has not materialized.
Something to think about if we're looking to change anything. Thank you.
Other questions for Lori? Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Town Assessors Department, and I will handle this. We currently have an interim town assessor. That position is currently being posted, and the assessor's office, as you'll see, has not, the budget has not changed dramatically. It's actually decreased for FY '22-23. That's as a result of retirement of a long-term employee and the position being started at a baseline salary for that role. So that is the decrease that's reflected in this budget. If the council has any questions on,
I do. So the elderly tax abatement, I know we had some seniors last meeting asking about it, and I remember we dealt with it last year by Zoom. So when will we look at any proposed changes to the elderly tax abatement?
so that would be a recommendation that would come out of the assessor's office to the manager's office and then ultimately to the council for a discussion on whether or not
Right.
you want to amend the ordinance to either increase the income level or modify it in another way. I mean, there's other options for that type of exemption program, but that would come from the town manager's office within the next probably 2 months. It needs to come before the tax roll is certified and before the exemption deadline,
Right.
which is May 15th. So
It's definitely something I would like to take a look at, and we haven't really talked about it, but I know we changed the threshold a little bit, and, we had people last meeting really talking about being able to live here and raising the 39,000 up a little bit, so I just would hope that we would just get some information, know what the ramifications would be if we were to expand it, increase it, change it in any way. To hear from a lot of seniors who want to be able to
yeah,
stay in that,
absolutely.
I'm-
And that's been a discussion actually with the interim assessor. He's aware of it, has also made some recommendations that need to be fleshed out a little further, but potentially will be presented to the council in a month or so.
So it will happen. I'm just kind of curious because the person's on interim, but it's definitely on their to-do list.
It's been discussed, yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Terry, just a follow-up question on that. I know the state had passed a law that allowed local municipalities to enact policies whereby seniors would be allowed to volunteer, and as a result, they'd get tax relief. I know it's sort of been in flux as to the tax assessor's sort of report on that to the council because there's been turmoil in that department. Any update on that?
If the council recalls, I actually submitted a memorandum with some detail as to the impact of what that program might look like. One of the concerns that was raised is that the capacity of the town to be able to take in multiple people and provide meaningful volunteer work for them. The other piece of that would be concerning is that there's no income level guidelines to it. There could be if the council chose to do that, but when you're looking at potentially a more targeted audience that may be more needing the break, you're looking at the elderly tax exemption program. You may be better off looking at raising that level of income rather than opening it up to a full age range of, I know there are probably interested folks, but the town, one, probably doesn't have the resources to offer up enough volunteer hours. Two, it could be someone who would probably, we have a lot of folks over 60 who volunteer and love it, but they don't may not necessarily need a tax break on their property, whereas there's a population, and again, that's a council decision, but those were some of the,
So that was a really good memo that you wrote. If you could, see, it's tucked somewhere when we did that. Can we find it and tuck it where the elderly tax abatement is, or link to that, so that so that someone who is on the website would know that the council took it up, that there was a memo from the town manager, and they could refer back to, I can't remember when the meeting was. It was well, we were on Zoom, so I don't remember. So
that can be shared. There was no decision made by council. It was simply an advisory. It was just informational. So
Exactly.
the public needs to understand that this was what was presented. There was no decision made.
Right.
Okay.
Just because we're always rewinding and then explaining the story to everyone who asks, and they would have, it was a good picture of like how challenging it would be. Because I remember saying, well, if someone wants to volunteer and pick up trash, well, we have a department who's, doing road cleanup or whatever, so.
It can certainly be shared there. It's also shared through all of the minutes on the town council meeting, but I understand people don't necessarily know to go to Clerk Base and open up the minutes of a particular
I just
meeting.
wouldn't know how someone would say, I'm interested in the elderly tax abatement law, and then find where it was in June of 2021. Like, how would a person
Right.
find that?
Right.
That's the harder part.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions on the assessors department, we can move to the planning department, and I'll call up the director of planning, Jamie Rabbit.
Good evening, everyone. It's always interesting to be introduced during the budget hearing process by the town manager to already highlight that the department has an increase. With regards to that, the department is asking for an increase this year of just under 10%. It equates to about $58,000. Of that, over $30,000 is on the salary and benefit side, leaving roughly $26,000 of additional resources. $6,500 of that is associated under computer services, basically for clerk base. The other large item is $20,000 increase to our consulting or professional services. That is added in anticipation of supporting the Route 1 Stewardship Committee, who has been meeting during the COVID years as well as over the last 6 months, and charged with putting together a plan via the study of Route 1 and looking at the development of that corridor long term and whether there are any beneficial regulatory changes that should be made as it relates to land use. Staff has been supporting that committee on an administrative basis. Jay Parker does staff that committee. We have given them multiple samples of stewardship plans. I think the intent originally was to have them author that plan, but that process is going on 2 years. At their February meeting, they did ask for assistance on the consulting side, if that was possible. We had anticipated that request, and that's why you see a line item increase from the previous year of $10,000 to $30,000. Again, those resources will be targeted for the Route 1 Stewardship Plan. They're different than our capital improvement program, which is looking at the more comprehensive, coordinated, and continuing land use program and studies in the years to come.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions? All right, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have building and zoning, and I'd like to bring up Jamie Gorman, a director of that department.
Thank you, Terry. Good evening. Well, I'm happy to say that the Building and Zoning Department's currently fully staffed, which consists of 2 part-time employees, 4 full-time employees. and we anticipate this coming year to be pretty busy, so just like last year. The 2022 fiscal year anticipated building permit records. That number that were issued was a record year. We expect 2023 to be similar. But the proposed budget increases are really minor. It's really benefits, salaries. Nothing really jumps out. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I got a question for you, Jamie.
Sure.
How are things going with the auxiliary dwelling unit applications?
Accessory dwelling unit?
Yes, sorry.
So, I mean, we've seen an influx recently over the last probably 6 months. As you know, housing prices, the market's kind of bonkers. So I'd say recently probably an uptick at least one every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, new application. So
We limited the intro of that to 20 applications in the first year, is that right?
20?
Is that right?
Maybe. I can't say for sure.
Thank you.
One question about the benefits line. Can that to me?
So the benefits line at 27?
Yes.
Increase over prior year, 27,000?
I can take
Isn't that contractual or?
30%?
So, yeah, for vacant positions that were, they just filled them, but at the time of budget prep, we have to vacant, fully loaded positions, so we assume benefits at family as opposed to single, so that's where you see the increase for the benefits, plus on top of the additional normal increases we're seeing for healthcare.
An increase, yeah. You see my concern, it's about a 30% increase there, which seems...
Where in the past, there was positions that didn't have benefits, and as a result, you see those increases.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question about services? So the line items are just so varied. So you're projecting $67,153 for services, but then you're proposing for this year $68,60.
I believe.
So that was a reclassification because we outsourced for the inspections because we didn't have an employee. So what we did is we took personnel savings from a vacant position and we moved that to professional services.
Did you say that? Did I miss that when you?
I didn't.
Okay. Just, I wasn't sure if you just added an extra digit because it's all similar numbers.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Next, we have facilities. Our Superintendent, Mark Russo.
Good evening. So the main driver on this budget is the salaries, which Terry had spoken about earlier in the evening, how it's they're being transferred from other departments to this budget, so we can finally have a, hopefully, in conversations I've had with Luke, make a standalone facilities budget and department, and then with the capital outlay here for town hall operations, that will just end up and then what's the word there? Combined into the facilities budget. So as it is right now, this budget is zero based. There's no increase in budget.
So you're only seeing the expenditure side here. What you see on the revenue side in the departmentals, you'll see about a $359,000 interfund transfer, which is coming from the outside funds that Mark's group provides services for. So what we did, instead of having the personnel allocated to those, what we've done historically, personnel was allocated to the outside funds. We moved that to an operating expense for the outside funds for custodial services. We moved all of the expenditures to the general fund, and then we bill out as an interdepartmental invoice, so to speak, and collect revenue that way from the outside fund, so that is truly under Mark's purview, and all the employees are under him and the general fund. So you see a significant increase here, but it's actually offset by revenue coming in.
And if I could add, the one thing that does with centralizing facilities function is it allows Mark more leeway and flexibility to place people where they need to be, instead of certain positions being only assigned to certain buildings or facilities. This way, if necessary, they can be reallocated to various town facilities. Yeah, right?
Well said.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Next, we have public safety, and we will start with Chief Ewing Chow, who will present the police and animal welfare budgets. And this is tab 7 in the budget document for anyone who might be following at home.
Good evening. You guys hear me on this? It's on? So we did see an increase in our public safety budget this year, primarily as the town manager had spoken about. I'm looking at proposing to increase staffing of 2 sworn officers. We spoke about using some American Rescue Plan funding to fund these positions for about 2.5 years moving forward. The workshops that we did before, we had looked at allocating about $407,000 to these 2 positions and fund them for about 2.5 years. So moving forward with next year, that's where a lot of the increase comes from, is with the addition of 2 officers. And the unit I'm trying to create is a community resource unit, and this unit of 2 officers will be primarily responsible for community engagement activities, mental health, working with our clinicians, working with social services, doing presentations at the senior center for elderly scams, national night out events. We plan on running a Citizens Police Academy coming up in the fall, which takes a lot of planning and does take a lot of effort on their part. There's many other things we're trying to do to reach out to our community, to open the doors of the police department. And, you know, in order to do that, we need additional officers. So that's why I'm asking for the possibility of 2 additional officers. And like I said, utilizing some of that American Rescue Plan funding to do so. A few other increases that we had, obviously salaries and benefits. We've spoken about that already, and that seems to be an increase. Slight increases in services. Commodities have went up as well, fuel and things of that nature. And then capital outlay, we were down. And the reason I did that, I went through this budget line by line, tried to cut where I could, and instead of ordering 3 additional marked police cars next year, I'm only going to order 2 marked police cars, because I think our fleet is substantial enough with our mileage to hold back a vehicle and then save that money there. So that's what I plan to do there.
Chief, any questions for the chief? All right, thank you, Chief Chow.
We got next one is animal welfare. Since we, as a police department, oversees the animal control division and the animal shelter, we did not increase personnel at all. We're at 3.4 personnel. Once again, we had a slight increase in benefits. Across the board, salaries have reduced a little bit. We had our ACO had retired, so now we have a new ACO moving forward, which that salary is a little bit less. And then moving to services, commodities, and capital outlay, very minor increases in those. And once again, the cost of a lot of things, fuels and everything like that, electricity has went up, so we need to look out for that for next fiscal year.
Chief, how are things going with the animal and fowl ordinance that we enacted recently?
Well, we haven't had to use it yet, which is a good thing. My own personal opinion was our ACO was very happy that that was there. And, you know, I've talked with her, and we're not out there, certainly she's not out there looking to catch animals, but she wants to be able to use this as a tool to maybe an animal owner that is not doing the right thing, and in order to get them to fix what's going on with their animal strength and their property. So we haven't written anybody up yet. We haven't done any warnings, but like I said, the tool is there under the ordinance in case we have to.
Chief?
Thank you.
Next, we have Fire Alarm and Communications, and we have Lance Whaley, our director.
Any questions for Lance? All right. Thank you, Lance.
Next, I'd like to call on Chief Stanley, EMS, to come up and present his budget.
Hear me now? Good evening. Our presentation this evening, as Terry had alluded to, and as you know, our project moving forward is to expand EMS. In our budget, we have proposed to increase our staffing levels to 8 personnel, full-time personnel, which will allow us to add a third transport unit. Our volume has increased over several years, dramatically in the past 2 to 3 years. And what this has put a strain on our current resources. We have two, and really some of our challenges, increased call volume, response times, and we have 2 transport ambulances that cover the town with our volume. And with that, when we transport a patient, if we go to South County Hospital, the average time is about 48 minutes that the truck is out of service. So if we're averaging anywhere from 12 spiking to 19, 20 calls in a 24-hour period. So during that time, those 2 trucks are on a call. We call it time on task. And then some calls required due to protocol will have to go to Kent Hospital or Rhode Island Hospital, Hasbro. For example, today we went to Rhode Island twice and Hasbro twice. So that unit was out of town for about an hour and a half. So by adding this third truck, that'll, what I call division of labor, it will spread the workload out and keep us a truck in service a lot more. Factors also the aging population. That's causing, we're seeing a lot more critically ill patients in years past due to aging. And also the town is fairly good size, square miles, and trying to get somewhere is a challenge. Sometimes you just can't get there from here. A lot of country roads and trying to get around. So really, I talked about the 2 ambulances, more time out of service, not able to respond. And we become more dependent on mutual aid to Narragansett, Charlestown, North Kingstown, Exeter. And really, all of southern Rhode Island is busy. We're just not busy. The other towns are. So we rely on them, and they rely on us. We can go to the next. So here's our volume. We see a dip in 2020, and really we saw a decrease in call volume in the first quarter, and that was COVID up through there. And we definitely had people that were not calling us. We were seeing patients that were experiencing heart attacks that were waiting up to 10 to 15 hours to call us. They just felt they weren't safe to go. So we did a lot of PSA information to say, call us, you're going to be safe. So since then, the volume has picked up and has not looked back, if you will. So if you look at our volume since 2015, the red is 2021. And I'm predicting around 4,100 calls next year and probably 4,500 the year after. We are averaging an extra 60 to 70 calls per month compared to the years before. So our resources just can't handle that. And so really, if you look at our budget, it's kind of, I've tried to keep everything flat except for when we add positions. So when we add positions, what do we have to add with that? Uniforms. contract obligations, training. So that's why you see in those areas where we have significant increase, because we have to outfit the 8 personnel with uniforms, training requirements of that nature. Also, we're seeing more calls. We use more fuel. So we see an increase of that. We also use more supplies. So as everything, the more volume we do, the more the budget expands for that.
Thank you, Craig. I got a quick question for you. So the increase in the FTEs of 8 here, that is 8 new FTEs at a half a year for this next fiscal year, is that right?
We looking at the budget and speaking with Zach and Terry, we elected to start this in January. Those positions be funded in January.
And those 8 new additional employees, those are necessary to operate the 3rd paramedic unit, right?
Correct, yeah. For us to add another 24-hour truck, we have 2 personnel on duty 24 hours a day, and we have 4 shifts. So that requires 8 personnel.
Got it. Thank you.
So we already have the 3rd rig? Or do
No. In fact, I'm getting out to go to bid within the next week for that 3rd vehicle for this truck. But we do have one that we will be able to use if that vehicle doesn't come in. Again, with COVID, the construction times, normally it took 6 months to build a vehicle. Now I'm being told it could be 10 months. But we will have a vehicle for them to use over the first of the year.
So the 3rd rig is going out to bid sometime the next.
I'm hoping to get it out next week.
Okay.
Yes.
And so it's March, so like 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
January, hire your people, put them in a rig.
Yep.
See ya.
Yep. So I'm figuring after the first year, maybe 1 or 2 months, the stars may line up and we may get the truck in. But we will have one to put them in regardless.
And that's the spare.
Correct.
That's the spare vehicle that you have, yeah.
Correct. Yep.
I do appreciate the data that you share with the call volume. It's just really crazy that if you look at the slide, EMS call volume slide, like, the one prior, if you look at it, like the high was like 3,300 and you're 400 calls more than that. And you expect 2022 to be at 40.
I'm estimating 4,100 for next year and 45 the following.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
I mean, the trucks will go hours on calls.
I know.
I mean, they can leave the station in the morning and not be back that night, and where they go for 6 to 8 hours running call to call to call.
And you could be flexible, like if the rig is not, if you put the bid out and it doesn't come for January, you would sort of have some idea. You could flex out a couple of months.
Yes.
Those hires.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? You wouldn't hire them in January if the rig wasn't coming till March.
Well, no, but I do have a spare, a reserve vehicle to put them in. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would rather use that and not wait to get this truck in service, so we can put it in the reserve vehicle.
Great. Thank you, Craig.
So Craig, just to clarify, so even if you went out to bid and it yielded no results, you still have a spare rig that you could utilize the new employees to put in by whatever date, January-ish, as you said?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you, Craig.
Next, we have Public Services, Director John Schock. And if the council doesn't object, what I'd like to do with John is just run him through his municipal budget and then also the enterprise funds that he's responsible for, water, wastewater, solid waste, if that's okay with the council. I'll skip ahead to those while we have John.
Tab 8.
tree wardens next? Must have missed that.
Contract to Malik for tree removals. This particular year, we're over what was budgeted. We do use reserve funding and unused funding in highway for that. The only thing I'd still like to say is National Grid helps us out tremendously. They've done hundreds of removals probably in the last 5 to 10 years. We continue to use them whenever we have a tree identified for removal. We'll first reach out to Grid. If that tree is a threat to their utilities, they will remove that tree for the building. Other than that, no real changes in tree warden budget. Street lighting, unless there's questions on the tree warden. So we'll go on to street lighting. Street lighting is decreasing, and the reason why is we're coming just to the end on the LED conversion project, so all we have left are a few rewires that need to be done, and the decorative lights on Main Street. Once those are done, the street lighting LED conversion project is complete. We've asked RIDOT to take over the state street lights, which have already been converted. That represents about 30% of the street lighting budget. You'll see that decrease as well. So we've gone essentially from about $200,000 a year when we bought the streetlights from Grid. The rental price for the equipment was about $110. That dropped us down to $90. And now when we have Grid take over about $30,000 a year, it's going to drop us down to about $60. So we've gone from 2 years from about $200,000 a year, we're down to about $60. The downside is we have to pick up the maintenance costs. Anything after the 1-year warranty period with Siemens those up. We don't have a whole lot of outages in a given year.
Is your mic on, John?
I think he's just not close enough.
Not close enough? Okay. So that's the good news, and we are still going to have more savings. We don't know what that is yet because the energy cost is going to drop because we've gone from high-pressure sodium to LED. So the street light program, to me, is a win-win, and I think we're going to see some significant savings from what we used to pay. On street lighting. Okay, moving on to highway. Highway begins on page 8-7. I just first want to recognize Scott Brown. Scott's the new highway superintendent, been with the highway division for many years, and is a local South Kingston. I think he grew up in South Kingstown. His father, as some may recall, was the building and zoning official for many years. So Scott's fitting in just well in his new position. So highway, again, no staffing requests, additional requests for this year other than the contractual increases. I am a little concerned with fuel. I think with all our commodities based upon what's going over in Europe, we think we budgeted appropriately for that, but we're going to find out. Hopefully things will normalize over in the Ukraine. But I think that's the biggest concern we have is the utility costs for highway garage facilities and the fuel costs, which is primarily they spend a lot of more fuel during the wintertime when we have a heavy snow season. So if it's a light winter, we typically spend less. Other than that, no real appreciable. And road salt did go up this past year. We ride the state contract for road salt. That tonnage. Price per ton went up significantly. Other than that, no real changes in the highway division. Questions on highway? Okay, moving on to water. That starts on page 17-1. So there's a couple there's a revenue side issue on this. One is T-Mobile and Sprint merged a few years ago. We have 4 cell carriers on the Victoria water tank. Sprint is in the process right now of decommissioning their facilities. So that's what we call non-rate-based revenue, but it's going to result in a loss of about $30,000 a year. So we've got to make up that on the revenue side. And also with the water fund, we purchase our water both for Middlebridge and South Shore from Suez. Suez is entitled to what's called a DISC increase, a distribution system infrastructure charge of no greater than 2.5% a year. They got that DISC increase approved by the PUC last year, and I would expect they'd have another 2.5% increase in the coming year, so we had to carry those costs. So that is unfortunately going to necessitate a rate increase. It's be the first rate increase we've had since 2014. And what we're proposing is the base minimum charge to go from, hold on just a second. It would go from $48 a unit to $55 a unit. And there's a two-step excess charge which we were required by the state to implement. And the first step would be from $3.25 per 100 cubic feet to $3.50 per 100 cubic feet. And the second step would be from $3.75 per 100 cubic feet to $4 per 100 cubic feet. And that's outlined on page 17-4. Same with other divisions, no staffing increase are requested other than contractual obligations. Any questions?
So what's the average homeowner's water bill? Because if it's going to go up $7 per...
Yeah, so if you know, they get an allowance of 1,250 cubic feet, which is about 7,500 gallons to 7.48 cubic feet per 7.48 gallons per cubic feet. So it's probably about 8,000 or 9,000 gallons. So as long as they're not exceeding that, it's going to be the minimum charge. So it varies. I mean, somebody who has sprinklers, some of the bills are pretty high, and in other bills they're at the minimum charge. So I'd say probably, you know, just as an order of magnitude, probably a third exceed the base minimum charge that have excess charge. Third of the customers, and again, we primarily see it with those customers that have in-ground sprinklers. And some of those bills can be pretty robust. I mean, to me, I'd let my lawn go dormant, but some people like the green lawn. That's personal choice.
So I'm just trying to figure out the base person.
And if you don't exceed
Yeah.
the base, the minimum allowance, it would be, it was 48, we're proposing 55. Plus, there's a water quality protection charge, which is a couple dollars. It's going to be somewhere $50 to $55 if you're not using excess consumption.
Okay, now I understand it.
And that's per quarter.
So it's 55 minimum per quarter if you don't exceed. If you exceed, it's a little bit of a tack on.
How much you're using for the excess.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John.
Onto wastewater, that's on page 18-1. So we are also proposing a rate increase for wastewater this year. The last one we had was June of 2020. And it's primarily due to the depreciation went up this year on the wastewater fund because of all the new construction that's going on at the treatment plant. We got to be able to recover those improvements through depreciation. So we had a significant increase in depreciation. And also our contract with Synagro is going up. They're the company that we haul our solids to up in Woonsocket. A portion of the solids goes to Central Landfill that's dewatered. The other portion goes to Synagro and Woonsocket. So their disposal fees are going up. The good news is the big construction project at the treatment plant is ongoing. We received a new piece of dewatering equipment. So we're hoping there's going to be some savings on the solid side once we get a drier end product when the new dewatering equipment comes online, but we don't know exactly what that's going to be yet. But that project is progressing well. The equipment was just delivered last week. And again, no increases, no staffing increases proposed for wastewater, other than the contractual increases that no new staffing positions are proposed or requested. All right, moving on to solid waste. That's on page 19-1. Again, another enterprise fund similar to water and wastewater. We are requesting an increase in the tag price for solid waste to go from $2.10 per refuse tag to $2.25. The rest of the fees are all set by contract with Waste Connections and are not proposed to increase. The tag price is going up because the tip fee is going up with central landfill for municipal waste. The tip fee was probably $32 a ton for 20 years, probably more, but it initially went up back in 2017-18 to $39.50 a ton. We had to adjust the price of the tag then. And then it went up to $46 a ton in 2018-19, which we had to adjust the tag price to what we have now. And now it's finally going to $54 a ton. So resource recovery, they got a delicate balance they have to try to accomplish, because they need their revenue base, but at the same time, they're trying not to encourage as much waste going to the landfill. If they can reduce waste, it preserves capacity for primarily residential municipalities, and they try to minimize the commercial waste that goes in. And again, there's no out-of-state waste that's allowed into the landfill facility. So, we've been told over time that, they had to finally increase that $32 a ton. They couldn't sustain that municipal tip forever, and that's why it's now up to $54 a ton after 2 increases. Other than that, the truck scale, just the council may recall, we extended Waste Connections contract to include the new weight scale. That's now installed and operable, so we've solved that problem at the transfer station. Any questions on solid waste? Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Next, we have Parks and Recreation, and I'll get back up to that category, and we'll call up Rex Eberly, who is our interim Parks and Recreation Director.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'll start out with the Parks and Recreation different budget categories. Although I've been doing the park maintenance budget and maintenance parts of some of the other accounts for over 20 years, this is the first time I've actually pulled it all together, and it shows me that it's really a group effort of all of our staff. Terry was a big help this year also in helping me get this together. So in the Parks and Recreation side of the budget, we have administration, park maintenance, athletics, aquatics, which is our beach operations, leisure services, which is a lot of our special events, parades, 4th of July, our nature programs. We have creative activities, which are our Stepping Stone Preschool, and then a small portion of it is the Harbor Patrol Natural Resources Officer. And it's the same as far as contractual services for salaries and benefits, along with other departments. We see a slight increase with contractual costs in those. As far as on the park maintenance side, we had some minor increases in services that we provide. It might be for extended periods of porta-john rentals. Now that we're seeing extended seasons both in the fall and in the spring, when restrooms are closed, we provide additional porta-johns. We see an increase in one thing that's shown us through COVID is a huge increase in park usage for our trail systems, our need for more mutt mitts and garbage collection, and we're starting a new increased recycling program. That's all going to require additional trash bags and paper towels and janitorial supplies, things like that. So there was a minor increase there. With athletics, staff drills down each of our programs, like our softball program, right down to the number of softballs we're going to buy, number of bats, things like that. So that's all encompassed in the athletics program, our youth basketball, things like that. Aquatics, really no increases there other than we did bump up our beach staff salaries a little bit to be competitive with the town of Narragansett, the state, and we did a statewide survey of other aquatic staff, and we're right in line with all of the other aquatics salaries. Leisure services, really tried to keep everything the same with a lot of our programs. But you have to realize when we keep a line item at zero increase, we're actually buying less because everything is going up. So we're having to find ways to be more efficient. And we always say we're always trying to do more with less. And that's the case in all of our budgets in Parks and Recreation. I don't know if you have any other questions as far as which ones go.
So the Stepping Stone Preschool, I'm just sort of curious, like, is there a way for it to be collaborative with the school department preschool? You know, my kids went there, it was fantastic a long time ago, but just curious how we sort of have like a parallel system in some ways, and I know the preschool is more inclusionary at Wakefield, but I didn't know if there was a way to...
I can answer that question. Is that okay, Rex?
Yes, absolutely.
So the Stepping Stone Preschool program is it's licensed through DCYF, not RIDE. So there is a distinction to be made. It's also the way the program is set up. It's half days, mornings, and so that's unfortunately there can't be that kind of merging or dovetailing with the school side of the program. Part of that has to do with the licensure of the actual building because there are certain, it's an old building, code requirements, those types of things. So it's, it is a program that every year we are never lacking for students. I think that there are families in town that for whatever reason that program is the right program for half days for their 3-year-old or for their 4-year-olds. Minimal costs associated. It's really staffing for the most part, and the building operations. So, but very good question.
Well, I just think that we've heard conversations about universal preschool and universal, am I saying the right thing? Universal preschool, right? Pre-K? Is that, it's the same, right? 4-year-olds, this is 3-year-olds.
So, and that actually will have, eventually that will have an impact on the Stepping Stone program, which may focus solely on a 3-year-old program if there's going to be a public school pre-K program. But for the meantime, and then, Rex, do you want me to talk about the Harbor Patrol Natural Resources? This is a new org within the Parks and Recreation Department. It was originally part of the Police Department program. The Harbor Master role was a part-time position. It has been rolled under the Parks and Recreation Department as a full-time position. What you see in this budget reflects only the costs associated with the municipal budget at this time. If you recall, the council approved American Rescue Plan dollars to fund this position for 2 years. I should say the balance of it with this funding that has come over from the police department side of the funding program. It is a full-time position. It deals with Harbor Patrol in the summer months and actually late spring, summer, and early fall. And then in the off-season, it focuses more on natural resources, which includes environmental monitoring. It includes much involvement with the harbor management plan and also public access. There's a initiative now, well, not now, it's been going on for a while, through the Waterfront Advisory Commission in terms of identifying all of the public access points in town and being able to address each one of those as they come up. Over the years, Waterfront has chosen spots here and there, but I'm sure many folks are aware of the spotlight and the push on making sure that all of our public access points are accessible to the public. That really came to light during COVID when people were looking for things to do outside of being together, and one of those things was being able to access the shore. And of course, here in South Kingstown, we're fortunate to have what we do. This position also involves involvement with the recreation programming side. Our Harbor Master Natural Resources Officer is here this evening. He will be doing environmental education programs through the Rec Department as well. And so that's what this position, in a nutshell, is meant to do. But for the FY22-23 year, you will see a total expenditure of $38,971, which reflects only that piece of the budget that was allocated through the Harbor Master Program in previous years, and the associated expenses that come with that, such as fuel and supplies and maintenance, and a small amount for capital. And you should see that reflected out of the police department budget detail. You won't see it in there.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Rex.
Okay, we'll keep Rex because he's also got some separate funds, the Guild and the Rec Center, if there's no objections to that. Actually, let me get to the Guild. I'll go back and do the Peacedale office building. Rex, you want to?
On the Neighborhood Guild side, with the Neighborhood Guild, it's basically everything is self-funded through our program fees, through interest from our trust fund, the Hazard Trust Fund, and so we have different orgs within the Guild, maintenance and front desk, senior programs, youth programs, our music programs, our adult programs, and our arts programs. So if you look at the overall budget, we'll see a decrease in salary and benefits there on those line items, and that's because, as Terry mentioned earlier, maintenance is being shifted over to the facility side, and so it comes out of the salary and benefits line there, but it actually is it's put back in down under services, so it'll be back charged from facilities. So that's why you see a little bit of a difference there in the salaries and benefits. Everything else is basically level funded in there. Any of the if there's increases, say like professional services, that's to pay our course instructors for programs that we run there, and so any expenditures on there are offset by revenues that we take from our programs.
If I may, I'll just point out one item on the expenditure statement for the Guild. You will notice that the senior programs is not funded. That has been that way since COVID, and the senior programs is the trips, the bus trips. And since COVID, bus trips have kind of been, we haven't had them because nobody was getting on a bus with 40 other people. So we are slowly trying to come back with that program. It's self-sustaining, so if we were to, there's the possibility that the Guild could run a couple of trips next year. It would be a wash. The trips pay for themselves. The trip fee covers the bus and the entrance to whatever the program is. But for our purposes here, we're trying to be very conservative on the Guild side of things. But you will see all the other program categories, and some are up, some are down. Again, there's still this kind of transitionary piece of coming out of COVID recovery, and what some things are gaining more traction, others are a little slower to ramp back up. So that's just something to keep an eye on the Guild. and the revenue statement shows how the Guild is funded with the trust fund dollars and also the revenue from all of the program fees. So you will see total Guild budget of $714,583. And again, staffing at the Guild, many of the staff people's personnel and benefits are split. So 50% is paid by the Guild, 50% by the municipal budget, depending on what their roles are. So if they have roles within the Guild that programs happen there, their piece of the pie gets paid out of the Guild budget. If they're programs that are not in the Guild, but they are working, that's out of the municipal side. We're very careful to try to allocate the funds properly based on the programs that are run. Any questions on the Guild? Okay, Rec Center?
The Community Rec Center, it's basically the same thing on the salary and benefits, where our maintenance staff has been reallocated to a services line and will be back charged to the facilities department. And everything else in the Rec Center is basically level funded. We did have one increase for security cameras and a couple of additional motors for the youth basketball backboards to raise and lower those. There was a $3,000 increase in the rec supplies account in that. Other than that, everything is pretty well level funded within the Rec Center budget.
Thank you, Rex. And so for the Rec Center, there is a request for a general fund transfer, as there is every year, to cover the Rec Center, and for 22-23, that's $379,235. The rest of the revenue, comes from rental income and athletic program revenues. As you can see, athletic program revenues is projected to increase considerably by 29%. We are starting to finally see an uptick in all the activities and the programs at the Rec Center, and so we're projecting a confident number for program revenues at the Rec Center, which is really good to see. And any questions on the Rec Center?
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Rex.
Yeah, before I sit down, I'd be remiss if I didn't say what a wonderful job, professional job Terry has done as an interim town manager. She has given, I think every staff member in this room will agree with me, she has been the utmost, most professional leader. She's gotten us through COVID. She's gotten us through multiple major storms. Selfishly, I can't wait for her to come back to the rec department. She's a great leader there and great to collaborate with on projects. So I think she deserves a huge thank you from everybody in this town for everything that she's done to get us through all this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rex. And the council feels very similarly.
Just a quick question. The designated fund balance that's there, is that the equipment reserve fund? What is
For the Guild?
Yeah, the Guild has a 15 and a 18 maybe?
No, the Guild has a fund balance within its own budget. That doesn't come out of tax dollars. It sits, so if at the end of the year there's a surplus, whatever that might be, 20,000, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays because the Guild funds itself. It funds its its capital improvements, and that's what that is. So if there is enough of a fund balance that we may need to use that to offset some of the expenses, we will do that. We typically do that every year, pull it in. A lot of it, or many times, it comes from the previous year's balance. So we kind of have to estimate because of programming costs. If we don't run all the programs, we don't spend all the money, vice versa. So there are years that there is a surplus at the end of or we do really well on programs when we have a surplus. Did I explain that right, Zach? You can elaborate if you need to. Okay. Okay, let's go back up to public libraries. We'll call up Director Laurel Clark.
Terry, good evening. So, the public libraries, as you probably know, are made up of Peacedale, Kingston, and Robert Beverly Hale. Our 3 buildings are funded by, this year our request is $1,385,000, $441, excuse me. So, much like my colleagues have said, our budget is mostly salaries. It's 80.82% of that budget. Equates to a little over $1 million, leaving the remainder of our budget to be approximately $265,713, sorry, which is 19.18% of the budget. Really no outstanding increases besides contractual.
All right, thank you, Laurel.
Thank you.
Next, we have non-departmental funds, and I'm going to have our finance director go through those funds for the council.
The non-departmentals make up our municipal insurance, property and liability, our unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, fund contingency for the council, and our town healthcare / OPEB. So for fiscal year 2023, these are, a lot of these are best guess estimates of what the increases will be, because we're trying to go off historical information that we have in claims history, plus trying to predict what may happen, 6 months from now and into the next year. So we tried to keep them, within a reasonable, anywhere from a 6 to 8% increase. So for municipal property insurance, we're seeing about a 5.94% increase. For our unemployment, again, we're predicting potentially an 8% increase. Workers' compensation, depending on claims history, we've actually come out a little bit ahead on this, so we're actually going to have a decrease this year from what was being charged to the general fund from what was in 2022. The fund contingency for the council, we increased that back to the original appropriation of $65,000 that you had last year before it was reduced at the final adoption to help balance the tax rate. And then the town health care, we have a contingency which we level funded at $75,000, and we are reducing the OPEB contribution by $75,000 down to $100,000 for fiscal 2023. The OPEB plan still stands at over 100% funded, but there could be some cases that may be coming up, whether it's disability related or retirements that could have a strain on the plan in the immediate future. So we're still recommending a contribution, but that can be reviewed before the end of the fiscal year, before the transfer is made to the OPEB trust. Recommendation would be made from the town manager's office whether to make that transfer or not, depending on how the fiscal year shapes up. Any questions on any of the insurances?
Am I doing this one? So, human services and outside agencies, it's going to be done on Wednesday night. That's when you will have your groups come in and present their request for funding for FY 22-23. What you see here is what's proposed based on previous years' funding. However, the council obviously can decide how they want to consider funding requests. You will notice a $20,741 increase. I believe that's part of parades and events, which is the 300th anniversary committee and a $20,000 proposed funding for that organization.
The final piece of the departmentals is the capital outlay. This is the pay-go portion of the CIP that was approved previously. The only change that's reflected here was the reduction from the capital and equipment replacement fund by the $39,000 from public services that was then transferred to the senior services to help fund the van.
If there are no questions, we'll move on to Peacedale Office Building Fund. This is another self-funding fund, and the Peacedale Office Building is, for those who may not know, directly across from the Peacedale Library, and it is overseen by the Parks and Recreation Department. It has some commercial rentals within the building that support the building operation, and it also has some programming space in the basement level. There's a pottery studio, and on the third level there are activity rooms. What you see here is a total budget of $90,867, and most of that is part of the operational cost for the building, and also the services line is up because, again, the building maintenance piece of this is now outside of personnel and benefits and reflected in services, and that's rolled under the facilities program. And this is the revenue statement for the Peacedale Office Building. You'll see our primary revenue is through rental income, and I'm happy to say that we have two recent new rentals of a couple of the smaller offices on the second level, which is certainly helping this budget. And we have also seen an increase on the recreation self-support programs as well, and that is reflecting an income at year-end in excess of $12,000. That's not always typical. We have had some challenges during COVID, so that is good to see, and that will go right into the Peacedale Office Building Fund to take care of the building in terms of expenses required for maintaining an old historic building. Any questions? To the Neighborhood Guild. Next, we have Senior Services, and I'll call up Director Susan DeMasi. And this is tab 13 in the budget document, if anyone wishes to look at the detail. Is the light on?
I wasn't sure if that meant off or on. Okay. Is the Transportation Services, Nutrition Program, Adult Day Service Program, and the Senior Center Program. Just to remind you that the Adult Day Services is now taken over by a third party, St. Elizabeth's community. So most of our things have stayed the same as far as personnel and whatnot. You will see a decrease because, again, of the facilities maintenance switchover. We also down a bit. We with COVID, some of our nutrition things have changed, and we have eliminated one position underneath the nutrition program. So that shows a little bit of a decrease there. There's more detail about the nutrition program and whatnot in the narrative. Most of our expenditure statements, transportation's just about the same. Nutrition program is more or less the same. I'll get into more detail about that with the Narragansett adding their congregate nutrition program this year. That's going to bring a little bit of a change. Mostly for salaries here, the increase for the senior center is due to we had 3 staff people whose portions of their salaries came out of the adult daycare budget, and since that no longer is that type of an operating budget, those salary portions were put into this, back into the senior center budget. So that's why you see some increases there. Other than that, most of them have stayed pretty much the same. As far as our revenue, transportation, we bring in some revenue with our bus passes, our bus fees. You know, we don't, we ask that, but we don't require that from any of the seniors. Our nutrition program in the past has been cost shared with Narragansett. They did start a new program in April. This has caused some concern for us because some of their residents would come to our programs. They're now going to Narragansett. It's the same meal, it's the same menu, but they provide also transportation to their town residents. We have asked for a cost share from Narragansett of roughly $41,000, as we always have, and that's based on a 4-year look back of how many individuals from Narragansett that we served. I have some stats on that. I mean, basically there were, they served about 32% of the meals were fed to Narragansett residents. The numbers are extremely high over this last 4-year period because of the last 2 years. Our delivery service was, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meals a week. So we will wait and see what happens with the cost share for the nutrition program. Let's see. As far as the senior services go, we are asking for a $60,000 cost share from Narragansett for the senior center activities. We have right now approximately 1,400 to 1,500 residents from Narragansett that are registered at our center and receive all of the services of our center. Right now, we do not have any classes that there is a charge for. We did initiate a participant fee July 1st, $10 a year for Narragansett and South Kingstown residents and $15 for all others. We've done pretty well. We've got about 60% or so of proceeds so far, with very little ask so far. Again, this is not something we're going to prohibit anybody from using the center, but we have a sign up, and most people are very, very happy and shocked that it's only $10. So that's helping. Grants have been a little bit down this year. And we're no longer generating any revenue from the adult day center, which would go back into the budget. So right now, again, with no adult day revenue, decrease in funding, grant funding, we are, we are requesting $526,964 from the general fund. That is an increase over the last budget year due to the reasons I've given. Again, the nutrition program is our biggest kind of wait and see from Narragansett. Should they not decide to contribute, this will result in a loss of approximately $41,000. They have done it for 15 years, and this is the first year that this is kind of different, so it's kind of a wait and see right now. As far as our classes, we have some of our classes went to rec center, so that's kind of a wash with the revenue and the expenditures, because whatever we brought in, we paid back out to the instructors. Let's see. So, overall, things are gearing back up again. We've had a rough 2 years with COVID. Many seniors are back, but many have not come back. Many will not be coming back. Many have passed away due to COVID. Many have moved because of adult daycares being closed and whatnot. Right now, bingo starts back up next week. So hopefully things are on an uprise. Everyone seems very happy to be back who has come back. Any questions?
I know it's not our responsibility anymore necessarily, but do we have a report on how things are going with St. Elizabeth and the adult day program there?
Yeah, I'm in contact with them. Pretty much they reach out to me. They did reach out to me 2 to 3 weeks ago. Their census has been low due to COVID. They have had people sick, and COVID did go through there much later than other adult days in the state. But people did come back. But they did reach out to me that if I had any referrals or whatnot, which I did, except a lot of them have moved to be closer to children or have gone into assisted living or nursing homes. So they have a new sign out there. It's beautiful. The staff is very nice. So I think it's just a matter of getting that word out there again, and now feeling safe that you can be in a setting like that.
Just one question. Do they have to follow COVID protocols that like hospitals have to follow?
Their staffing did, and if the clients could, they would. Sometimes due to the memory issues for some of them, it causes more agitation and than it's worth. So they were very careful about spacing, and they had enough space with the number of clients that they had to keep them separated and whatnot. But yes, generally speaking, the staff all were had to be vaccinated. They had to follow all of those protocols.
And what are you, what kind of protocols are you instilling at the senior center?
So the senior center, we're following the town protocols. Masks have come off. Most of my staff, we have 4 full-time. It's still full masks on the bus. And a couple of us, often when we're up in a crowd, we'll put our mask on when we leave our desk or office, mask during serving lunch. But I would say 95% of the participants do not wear a mask. Yeah. We are finding that many that we thought were vaccinated were not vaccinated, so we made it through. But yeah, for the most part, they're happy to have them off.
Thank you, Sue.
Next, we have debt service fund, and Zach will run through that for the council.
Sure. So this makes up the debt service for the education and the municipal debt. So you will notice on the projected there is a surplus, and that's because in the FY22 there was, for the school bond, we did budget for interest only on the $85 million note. That would have been equated to, that was about 500 or half a year of it was about 578,000. Obviously that didn't take place, so we will generate a budgetary surplus as a result. Also, there was a portion of the $6.5 million municipal bonds that did not get sold during fiscal year 2022. That sale, the billing, the actual payments won't have, debt service won't have to take place until fiscal 23, so there is a small savings on that as a result. So we use that surplus, and on the revenue side, we lowered, and you can see the general fund transfer that was done in 2022. We are proposing to reduce that transfer to 1.3 million, close to 1.4 million, and that pretty much just covers the debt service that would exist for the schools, for the debt that's outstanding for them, the municipal debt that's outstanding, and that would include the debt service for the $6.5 million of bonding that we just closed on last week.
Questions, Zach? Questions from members?
That is the end of our municipal program budget. Open to any questions the council may have.
Any questions by the members at this point? of Zach, Terry?
I would just say, another question. Great job, as usual, as we expect, I think, up here from Old Town staff. And, I talk to council members and other local councils who do not have perhaps the reputation of our town in preparing budgets. One local one was telling me that they just couldn't account for $3 million over the past 5 years. I was like, huh, things are pretty good around here. So that, of course, is a bad situation. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for again, doing a great job.
Zach, I have a few questions for you while we're here. I know that this budget proposes a 2.26% increase in the tax levy as compared to last year. I just want to ask you, if in fact we decided to have a lower increase in that tax levy, what areas would we sort of look to reduce spending?
Preliminary, I would tell you you could look to lowering the contribution to the OPEB fund would be one of your first places I think you could go to. I think you'd be relatively, we're very conservative in the number we have right now. You could lower that, or you could, I would suggest, or take it down to zero if necessary, depending on what the needs are and where you want it to be. Other places to look at, off the top of my head, you could potentially look at capital contributions. You could look at, those would be the first two that would come to mind. But I would say, depending on what your needs were, we'd want to go back and kind of run through every department ahead, talk to the department, see what, we'd like some guidance from the council on where you would want to be, and then we'd come back with, similar to what we did last year, come back with a few proposals, and you could select from there.
Yeah, I think it would make sense when we go through preliminary budget adoption meeting to have some different options in case we'd like to sort of have a limited impact on the taxpayer here. Another question I have for you, we haven't really touched on it tonight, but I know in previous years we've pulled on the undesignated fund balance, which we have a fair excess of, to help sort of plug some gaps in the budget. Can you just talk about that a little bit? I know that's something the rating agencies sort of frown on.
So they look at the use of fund balance, and they want to see why are you, if you have a steady increase, why are you increasing? Is it because you're missing something in your budget, or are you just falling back on it? So ours was a combination. When we sat with the rating agencies, we explained that. One, we used our use of fund balance because in 2020, if you remember, we had a significant surplus. And the reason we had the surplus is because we held back because of COVID had just started in March. There was too many unknowns. We recommended to leave it in the general fund, leave it as liquid as possible in the unassigned fund balance. As we've progressed, we've learned more about what has happened. We've, ultimately have done okay in terms of that. We have drawn down on the fund balance last year to maintain the tax rate, so we increased that from where we were from 20 to 21, and then from 21 to 22. And then in 23, we're staging it back down to get back to where we were in 2020, which is in that $500,000 to $600,000 range. So the rating agencies were okay with what our explanations were, why we used it to stabilize the tax rate, and because we were in kind of unprecedented times. They will start to look at it towards the future. Now, because we're at the high end of our policy, using the fund balance we have now would bring us down in 23. I'm projecting you'd be in about a high 15s, low 16, which would be well within your policy of 13 to 17%. And that could be another area where you could look to, if that's a possibility, if you wanted, you could potentially, come back up again and level fund, and that would give you another 100 or 100 and so, 120,000 if you wanted to maintain services, reduce the tax rate, or change some sort of funding anywhere else. That could be a potential. So although it looks like on paper we've had a steep incline, at the same time, the rating agencies are quite comfortable with where we are and why we did it. What they would look to is if we're using the same explanations multiple years out for future offerings, it could raise a concern. So I would say over time you'd want to steadily bring that back down and then kind of hover where you would want to be in terms of the policy, and then have that target. And if you're over a specific target, you could make we could make a recommendation where that money could go. But we do have a wide policy in place, and that's for multiple reasons.
Thank you, Zach.
Those were both of my questions, where we could identify some reductions in spending and also to look at the undesignated fund. It's 4-8 is the slide in the budget where it discusses the undesignated fund balance. So I know people might be uncomfortable where it's at, but we're over 17%, which is at the high end of the range. So, and I do see that it came down a little bit last year. Maybe we can bring it down again because it's hovering at $15.7 million, and that I'm listening to people, and the water is, even if you're just at the minimum. Where's John? Where'd John go? Even if you're just at the minimum, someone's going to pay a minimum of $30 more in water. The average tax increase for the average home is up $250. Like, you start adding and adding and adding. So, and then people fill up their car on Saturday and it was $4, and then it's something more today, and there's a little bit of agitation in the community about just not predicting what's going to happen. So I think we should look at both reducing some expenditures or just tightening up maybe the commodities, whatever it is, and OPEB or whatever, and then also looking at increasing the undesignated transfer. I think, Terry, you had said it was 1.2 million, maybe coming down, just adding a little bit more so that we get that $11 under, under 1102, under in the 10 range, I guess, coming down, because when I asked on last week, really the tax rate is $14.77. If you apply your old numbers, we're at $14.45. If the budget were to just roll forward, the proposal would be $14.77 per thousand, correct? So for people to understand that that's really what we're looking at, a 24 cent per thousand increase about on the old rate.
Right, but that would have still held your levy at a 2.26% increase in the overall levy, which is what the state looks at, which we have to, which is certified by the state ultimately, is what the increase in the property tax levy, not the rate.
Right.
So while there is shifts in the percentage of the rate, the levy would still remain at 2.26, 2.27, because we would still have the same need. You're just using a different base to calculate the rate on. So instead of 6.2, you'd be at like 5.1. Your billion for your base, which is what would drive your rate from 1445 to 1478. I would only say on the reserve, the unassigned fund balance, is that South Kingstown's unassigned fund balance is one of its major factors in our assets, because it's our real estate, our property value, what drives for us. We don't have a huge commercial base. We don't have a huge tangible base. So the rating agencies look at us as a coastal community. We do face, environmental issues in the future, which they do take into account. So while the fund balances are built up and they're there, it's what keeps us at a AA1 rated agency. It's one of our biggest assets that we have. So I would just say, I would caution in the future but you still have flexibility in using some of that.
So the 10% of the fund balance would be at $9 million. We don't want to be at $9 million, but we don't necessarily need to be at $16 million either. That's just, and so when Terry takes away $1.2 million into this budget, what do you project the fund balance to be?
We'd be, around that, in the 14.5, 14.7 range.
I just want to make sure. I heard Deb say that the average home is going up $250 in taxes. I think we had a demonstration up there earlier for a $400,000 home with a 35% value increase, but that's not the average increase.
So the average home, based on the number of single resident units divided by the tax at value, came out to the average was $548 for a single family home, based on the current assessed values. Prior year's assessed values, the average was the 400 and whatever. So if you took the difference between the two averages, if you fell in that range, you were seeing roughly a $245 or $260.
So,
But
yes.
this slide shows you that if your home, or this slide shows you that if your home was assessed at $400,000 last year, and depending on what percentage increase you realized from the valuation process, your new assessed value at the new levy, and then the difference between your dollar increase and your percentage increase would be anywhere from 35% increase would be 171, moving up through the.
Right, but I guess what I'd say is that there's a whole section of this graph or table which is missing, which is 30%, 25%, 20%.
Correct, because you can see.
Some people are seeing price or decreases in their taxes.
You would see a reduction if you're below, right around 31 is when you're starting to see an increase in your taxes from the year before. Below 31, you're seeing reductions from your property taxes.
Right, and the overall increase in the tax base is around 25%.
Yeah.
For every property, not, is
That's
there?
all taxable property.
Right, so commercial and industrial probably didn't go up 30%. It's the homes that went up. So could we get some sort of a breakdown of that? Because I think that's where people say, if it's 25, but my house or someone's house went up 35, it's the commercial property. Is it the commercial property that's?
So the single-family resident homes in the 2021 tax roll were $3.7 billion for assessed value. The 2022 tax roll, which is what we're proposing here, goes to a $5 billion tax roll for those same 9,000 units, 9,200 units. So they saw a $2 billion increase in their assessed value.
Is that adjusted for the increasing number of units, or is that just total?
So that's total assessed value. We had a count in the 2021 tax roll of 9,141 single-family residents versus 9,176 most recent assessment. Not a huge spike in number of single-family residents.
Thank you.
We could get you, if you wanted to see it by class, we could get you.
And then the impact, not related to us, but related to the residents, is the fire, the Union Fire and the Kingston Fire is all connected to the assessment rate, correct? But do they adjust down?
They would have to set their rate, and they follow similar state law, that they have to assess to a cap. Not knowing their needs, I don't know what they're going to project for a cap.
Say that again.
I said, I don't know what they're going to project for any potential increases in their rates, not knowing what their budgetary needs are.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get clarification around all the numbers. So the 2.26% increase will average out, we think, to a $250 increase in tax bills for the average home.
Roughly.
Okay. Thank you. So I would just say, when we're looking at that 2.26% increase, we have to think about it in the atmosphere of 6-7% inflation right now, contracts that are baked in, and the fact that we're trying to increase our EMS service as well as our community resource officers. So I think 2.26 is pretty responsible.
Another area that you may see a reduction, it's just too early to know right now because we're so early in the budget process, is we hope that the rates, as you saw last year, we had better than anticipated rates for healthcare and dental, but the trust doesn't release that information until mid to late April, so you will know that before final adoption. So that would be an area automatically that you could adjust accordingly to what we would see for if there is a savings. But the range we're in right now was the trust agreed with what we presented in the budget, but we're hoping those will come down.
Any more questions for Zach? All right, Terry, Zach, department heads, fine job across the board. You all clearly have a strong hold over your budgets, and we appreciate that. Very informative presentations. Before we end, we would like to open it up for comments from anyone who would like to speak in regards to the budget. If you do so, just please come up, identify yourself, and we'd like to limit you to 5 minutes just to allow others to speak as well.
Hi, my name's Greg Sweet. How much cash does the town typically have on hand? I mean, I know they got the reserve of about 16 million. Public Works has 1.8. School has 2.
So that's available for us, that's probably in the if we didn't, with investments, we're in the 20 million range.
With investments?
With our investment, we could liquidate our investments, they're pretty liquid if we needed to. I don't have the number in front of me, but I can get that for you.
How much do we have, like, in a savings account or checking account? And I'm sure that's not how it's done.
Right now, it's probably in the hundreds of thousands, just to cover,
Payrolls.
Yeah, we try to keep it pretty low because we're not really earning anything right now, just like everybody else isn't earning in their savings and checkings account. We try to put ours and move it on a regular basis to our investments.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Doral Beasley. So I know some people that live in certain parts of town. So I know of people that their evaluation of their houses went up 100%, 70%, 50%. If somebody's valuation went up 100%, say it was worth, I don't know, $1 million, say now it's worth $2 million or whatever. So they're going to pay like $8,000 a year more. It's like a 50% increase in their tax bill. That's not insignificant. Of course, you can say, well, gee, they live near the water, so I'm sure they can afford it, but that's not necessarily the case. Last Thursday night, on the school budget side, you talked about toward the end a little bit about calculating the amount of money that the school should get on a per pupil basis. I didn't see too many heads nodding in agreement up there, so it's probably a dead duck. But the reason I'm bringing it up again tonight is this: in the last 5 years, our per pupil expense has gone up 35%. At the same time, the transfer to schools is only going up like 15%. That's because you haven't done your jobs. Your jobs are to manage the total budget for the town. The schools have gotten too much money because they've only dropped like I think it's going to be 442 full-time employees that's in their budget. That's a drop from 460. So now we have like 5.7 students per employee. 15 miles to our north in East Greenwich, they have the same amount of students, and then their school budget's $23 million a year less than ours. But we don't have 4- and 5-star schools. So at what point do you say to the school district, you have all this money, you have all these people, you have the second lowest class size, of any town in the state, as far as I can tell. And yet our students in this last year's RICAS test on mathematics, so we had 1,100 kids from grades 3 to 8 that took the test, 1,100. 200 of them were in the lowest quartile. So they got between 440 and 470. That was their score. The next 800 kids in our schools were in the next quartile. That was in the partially meeting expectations. So we had my brain's fried. We had 900 out of 1,100 kids that were didn't meet or partially met expectations. In fact, we had the ninth largest decline in math scores in the state of Rhode Island. It was dropped 44%. That was worse than the city of Providence. And yet, you never ask, you never put their feet to the fire. You just keep giving them the money, and they're not producing. I hope I'll send you more information. Maybe one of these days you'll actually read it.
Thank you, Doral. Anyone else at this time? Feel free to just come on up, just introduce yourself, and you can speak on matters related to the budget. All right, if not, that brings us to the end of this budget work session. The next work session will take place on Wednesday, March 9th at 6:30 p.m., and we will consider requests from outside agencies. Thank you for coming, and have a good night.